What is up, SVSers? Welcome to another SVS Audiophile Happy Hour, our favorite thing to do on a Thursday. And we're super excited tonight. We do have a little bit of late-breaking news to share. Our guest we were supposed to have for tonight, Rob Burrell, the four-time Grammy-winning sound engineer. He has an illness, so he will not be joining us. But the good news is we have Ed Mullen, and we are going to have Rob Burrell back on in a future episode, hopefully the next one, which was March 31st. But we wish him well. He'll be back. He's doing fine. And so we're excited to have him back. But we got Ed. So let's go around and do as we normally do. Ed, how are you this evening?
Doing great, Nick. Thank you for having me.
You're our favorite
so
guest.
Much
You're not even a guest.
Oh,
Ed, come on, perk up.
He'll get there. Once the AV questions start rolling in, that's when the sparks fly. But Larry, how you doing tonight?
I am great. I'm excited. The Batman movie comes out this weekend, so I'm going to try to go see that. So I'm pretty stoked.
That's an exciting
one. I'm pretty stoked to see that too.
You got a new T-shirt there too, Larry. So that always gets everyone excited. And of course, we have our president here at SVS, Gary Yakubian. Gary, how are you this evening?
As always, this is the highlight of my week, especially my work week. And I did want to say, I'm sorry that we don't have our guest. He's out due to illness. He's going to be fine. So, we know we're going to have him on a future show. But this gives us an hour to answer any questions you guys have. And we're going to be watching, especially Larry and Ed and myself, we're going to be watching your comments. Ask any question, tough, whatever. And this will be an hour where we will really do our best to get everybody a little knowledge about this hobby that we're all so passionate about.
Education's the name of the game today. And we're even going to bust out our glossary again. We haven't done that in a while, so we're excited for that. But for anyone who might be joining us for the very first time, we'll have 4 giveaways this evening, which Larry will fill us in on here in just a minute. To be eligible, all you have to do is leave a comment or ask a question, and we'll have our teammate working behind the scenes to pick people at random, and we will announce them live throughout the broadcast today. And Larry, what are those fantastic giveaways we got on tap?
They're pretty sweet as usual, but little added extras tonight too. So we're going to start things off with a PB1000 Pro subwoofer, followed up by a pair of our Prime wireless powered speakers, and then a pair of Prime bookshelves with the Ultra SoundPath cable to hook them up. It's really awesome cable if you haven't had a chance to see that. And then we're going to end the night with an SB2000 Pro that will be paired with our SoundPath Wireless Audio Adapter. So 4 phenomenal prizes tonight. Hopefully some of you can walk away with that.
But we didn't have our guests, so I think we should jazz up that final prize a little bit. So you said SB2000 Pro with what?
With the SoundPath Wireless Audio Adapter.
And how about they also can get with the SB2000 Pro? This is my favorite combination: Ultra bookshelf speakers with SB2000 Pro.
Nice.
How about that?
Wow.
That's a nice combination.
I don't think there'll be any objections to that. So, Vince, I hope you're paying attention there.
I just said what an awful prize.
Well, there you go. It's a prize here. So, we're making friends already. Love that. So, as we typically do, I think it's been a couple of weeks, and we've all been checking out some different content, I'm sure. But Ed, we haven't talked to you. Well, I guess you were on the late end of the last broadcast, but we didn't get to hear your recommendation. So, I am going to start with you first. I know you always have something good in your glass, so start there. And then, what have you been tuning into recently?
Well, I'm drinking Tullamore Dew, which is sort of a mid-grade Irish, but the interesting thing about this is it's finished in Caribbean rum casks. It's a win. It's a pretty new release for them, and I like it a lot. So I can recommend that one for the Irish lovers in the audience. I'm not sure, Leah, if I said we binged Reacher. I know Larry talked about that last time. I thought that was great. It's been opened up for season 2 already. Obviously the character matches the guy in the books in terms of physicality, unlike Tom Cruise. So it was kind of neat. And we also watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier as one of the first of the Disney Marvel series, because we now have Disney Plus in our house.
Awesome.
Very nice. Good recommendations there. Larry, I'm going to you next. What have you been tuning into?
I've been bad on watching a lot of stuff because there's just you all know I'm a Mavericks fan, so I've been watching a lot of basketball. But I have picked up some movies to go back and watch, and that's this weekend. But I also picked up the new Horizon game for the PS4, PS5. So I am looking forward to get into the worlds of that this weekend and expanding upon that.
Yeah, NBA season's coming to a close. And Gary, I'll let you finish, but my recommendations, I don't even know if this is a recommendation, but it sort of caught me off guard. My kid was watching this show called Craig of the Creek, which I believe is on Nickelodeon. And I heard this really familiar voice, and they were actually like rapping as part of this cartoon. And the name on the show was Deltron, and it was Del the Funky Homo Sapien, who was always one of my favorite like lyricist rappers from back in the day. And to see that he's doing children's cartoons sort of made things come full circle for me. And it's actually a pretty good show. It's very watchable for adults. So Craig of the Creek, that's my dark horse recommendation. Binging Ozarks, I think a lot of people mentioned that last week. And then Larry, I know you picked this one up, but on HBO, The King's Man. I think this is like the prequel to all those King's Men.
Yeah,
very dark.
Yeah,
and I was watching it late at night, so I didn't get the full dynamic experience, but I liked it. And again, it's pretty much darker than I expected it to be, but a good flick.
What
overall.
network is that on, Nick?
I just caught it on regular HBO. It was actually on, and yep. So I just started watching it last night, and kept me into the night there. So those are my recommendations. And I also have to say, my son is at a Tyler the Creator concert tonight. It's his first concert by himself. He's 17 years old. So everyone cross your fingers and get in trouble tonight, because I don't know what's going on there at those concerts.
Probably nothing safer than being inside at a concert. That's highly overrated as a dangerous thing. I think he's going to have a great time.
It's not just that. There's, substances and stuff too, but I trust him and have fun. I know you're going to enjoy it. He was looking slick leaving the house, so dressed to impress. Gary, what do you think?
We binged Ozark too. I've seen a lot of comments on that. Man, what a cliffhanger at the end.
Don't say anything.
I won't spoil it.
Don't pull a Thomas on us.
Awesome ending to that season.
Yeah. Before we get to you, Gary, I am drinking a Booker's Old Fashioned, and I got to say, the Luxardo Cherry. If you're gonna have fruit,
you made yourself an Old Fashioned.
Yeah, you got to have the Luxardo cherries. They're like $20 a jar. It's ridiculous, but they make such a difference. Don't mess around with.
Did I tell you my neighbor makes bitters, and so we made I know, right? We made Old Fashions a couple of months ago. It was really fun.
Yeah, my go-to.
Bitters.
Nick, send out that link for the cherries.
I will, no doubt. Gary, I know you're not probably drinking an Old Fashioned, but you always have some.
I do want to really. I have a bone to pick with Ed, because he was talking about this Angel's Envy that he drank, and I'm like, oh, I'm going to try it. I don't really know much about bourbon, so I bought a bottle which was $110, and it tastes like maple syrup. I was like, whoa.
It wasn't me.
I'm bringing it to you in Ohio.
It might be. Maybe it was Smith. I didn't recommend that.
I thought it was you.
Honestly, nope.
I think I picked up the wrong stuff.
Well, Shaggy.
I have heard of that. Angel's Envy.
So I am all about live performance, although I did something that drifted off my radar screen, which is actually one of our favorite shows, Curb Your Enthusiasm. We watched the whole season that just ended in December, and we binged it, and it is so funny with so many guest stars. It's not a demo at all, but it is so funny. I love it. And yes, somebody just flew by me here. I did see Tool last week in DC, where I live, with a buddy I went to college with, who knew them from their recorded music but had never seen them live, and I'm like, get ready for something. And it was just epic, and it was so much fun watching his jaw drop from just the sheer power of it, and the intensity of it. And but then Monday night I'm going to see Yo-Yo Ma and Emmanuel Axe. Everybody knows Yo-Yo Ma. Emmanuel Axe is a pianist almost on the level of Yo-Yo Ma at the Kennedy Center in DC. So I'm all about live performance right now, and I'm really, really excited about that. And then the other thing, and I don't mean to do this, I do it every time I feel like, but I'm just having so much fun with Qobuz. And I'm realizing, because you guys, I know everybody thinks I'm just a metalhead, but actually I listen to a lot of classical music, and I was just shocked at how much how broad the selection of classical music they have on Qobuz. And so maybe I was thinking one of these days I was going to maybe take 5 minutes on our show and help people get an entry point into classical music if they're interested, they want to learn, but they don't want to just start with anything. I have sort of a thing I tell friends of how to do an entry point into classical music and the kinds of music to choose that would be more accessible for people that aren't familiar. So one of these days.
I love that. I think we could get a guest on who might have some interesting things to add to that conversation too, as far as classical music. We had that one gentleman who did all those Oro 3D mixes, so that'll be an interesting one. I'm totally on board.
Maybe we can talk Jenny from WPA into doing it. I'm on the board of Washington Performing Arts, which is they do all the most exciting classical music in the Washington area, and I think her title is president and CEO. I'm not positive. I should know this. Jenny Billfield would be a fun guest, don't you think? Talking about music.
Absolutely.
And live
they do all sorts of great stuff. And
yep.
So yeah, I'm totally on board for that. So we're at the point now where Larry has a special. There it is, Larry's movie demo minute. He's going to share a demo scene from one of his favorite movies that really Larry, why don't you just tell us why what you've chosen and why it's so great?
Well, I will. It's not one of my favorite movies because it's not a great movie, but it's one of my favorite experiences in a theater. And I think we all have that, where you see a movie and it's not very good, but man, did it sound awesome. And tonight we are going to discuss Alita Battle Angel. And it's a good movie, but it was the last 3D movie I saw in Dolby Cinema, and one of the best cinematic experiences I ever had. When they brought it home, oh, it sounds amazing. There are a couple sequences. They play a game called Motorball, which is like rollerball, but you're really killing people and stuff. And there's so much atmospheric stuff going on. There's crowds surrounding this arena. There's the actual ball itself that they're chasing down. All these people are on like rollerblade style systems. And so there's the crowd, there's people running into each other, there's fighting, a lot of high pitched stuff, but also some deep thunderous bass because there are some explosion stuff. And there's two sequences in particular that I marked, but the big one is chapter 28 if you have the disc, and it's a massive motorball sequence that goes on for an extended period of time. So there is a ton of things going on in front of you, behind you, and above you, all frequencies, music, a little bit of everything, and it's a pretty fun experience too.
That's awesome. That sounds like something we might have to bring with us to Axpona in Chicago when we do our next big audio show.
It is absolutely in the demo case. We've done it a few times, but not many.
I'm seeing some great questions here, so I'm trying to keep up with them by writing them down. But I'm gonna throw them out there when we get to our lightning round. But I'm not able to keep up with the names, so I apologize for not shouting out the name. But I've already gotten 3 really good questions that people have asked.
So we're going to get right into that after our glossary. We promised some education today, and we have a couple glossary terms, which were a big hit when we did it a few broadcasts ago here. So we have some terms that we wanted to define, and we'll do one, and then we'll do a giveaway, and then we'll do a couple more. But I'm going to start, and I'm just going to throw these out. This is a free-for-all. But I think a term that gets thrown around a lot when you're talking about subwoofers and even speaker output is the term effortless when it refers to power or output. What does effortless mean?
Maybe I'll start. Ed, you can. Well, I think Ed and Larry can easily riff on this as well. Basically, you don't want to take the amplifier, and this is true, I think, of a subwoofer, but it's true of any system, really. You don't want to take an amplifier to its limits, if at all possible. So the way you engineer that not to happen is you create an amplifier that is way more powerful than is needed for everyday applications. And when you do that, the amplifier is so within its comfort range in terms of delivery that the dynamics, the excitement of experiencing the content, whether it's 2-channel or home theater, is completely natural. And that's what I mean when I say effortless. The amplifier is so within its its capabilities that it just doesn't even breathe hard to deliver an astounding, exciting experience. Ed, would you riff on that? Or
yeah, I would even extend it to Nick. Was the question about subwoofers in particular?
It's about whatever you want it to be about,
as
Ed.
a term, so it could be any amplifier. Really,
I would extend it to say if you're talking about subwoofers or loudspeakers, it's really the dynamic range of the entire system. And if you're looking at subwoofers, is it able to have high dynamic range in the really deep octave, say 18 to 36 hertz, just as well as it has great dynamic range from 40 to 80 hertz? If you've got awesome dynamics, low distortion, uncompressed output, like Gary was saying, the presentation is very effortless. It just gives you the sense that it's never running out of gas, it's never clipping, it's never distorting, and that is in and of itself a great experience in your theater or music system.
I'll put it in super simple and quick terms. I think it's the ability to play as loud as you want, and the term I hear from a lot of people is without breaking a sweat. It doesn't break a sweat. It sounds like it's not even trying, but it plays as loud and remains clear without distortion, without breaking a sweat. So that's my layman's definition.
I think that's a good way to put it, because it's not. It's hard to. We're not doing the best job of saying it. Excuse me, I'm gonna cough here. It's not that it's playing loud so much. It's that it's playing as loud as you want it without even trying. And that makes it seem natural. That makes it feel like you're really right there with the musicians if it's 2-channel, or with the action if it's a movie.
Great insight. So next one we're going to do, and this is a key function of our subwoofer control app, but it actually goes sort of beyond that as well. And I'm going to throw this one to you, Ed. Parametric EQ.
A parametric equalizer, well, we could just step back and say that traditional equalizer has a frequency and then a cut or a boost. A parametric equalizer adds one more feature. It adds the bandwidth of the filter. So you've got cut or boost, and then frequency, and then bandwidth. So it allows you to tailor the frequency response of, say, the subwoofer, because our subs have 3 PEQs, to take care of, for example, room modes.
EQ is parametric equalizer.
Right. If there's a peak or a null in the frequency response, you can use the parametric equalizer to hone in on it and eliminate it from the room acoustics. And that's the best way to do it, because you've got that variable bandwidth, which is the extra feature that the conventional EQ does not have.
So just to bring it to a normal experience, equalizers got a very bad name when they first came out, because a lot of times they would fix one thing but then create a whole bunch of other problems, because exactly what Ed said, they would affect some frequencies that you wanted them to affect. They'd affect other frequencies that you didn't want them to affect, and they would cause something called phase shift in their ability to sort of deal with the frequencies that you're trying. And by the way, you're not trying to enhance, like add bass to the content. You're trying to account for what the room is doing by using the equalizer to I raise or lower frequencies to account for what the room is doing. But what Ed is talking about, a parametric EQ allows you to dial it in directly into the frequencies that are affected without negatively affecting the rest of the content. Keeps it a natural, believable experience.
Yeah, it's really flexible, way better than a conventional EQ.
And all SVS subwoofers use a 3-band parametric equalizer. And by the way, if you don't want to play with it, don't. That's something that is a default on our subwoofers, is that it's not on. And if you want to play with it, you can, but you don't have to.
Yeah, and there were a couple questions that came up saying that the app seemed confusing. And as Gary just said, you really don't have to do it. If you're just setting up a home theater and you just want everything to sound good and be easy, you'll probably just mess with the volume adjustment. And that's really all you'll play with in most cases. But when you start dealing with duals or tricky placement or trying to make some real fine-tune adjustments, that's where the app comes into play. And I'll give a shout out to Youthman. If you get on his channel, he's got a great video about our app in there.
Is he Youthman or You the Man?
Youthman.
Youthman.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I never
He is
thought
the
that it
man.
could be
Because
used.
I think he has an E at the end of the TH.
No, it's
So-
just youth, YOUTH,
it's
man.
man.
But
He
you
is the
throw an
man,
A in
though.
there. Well, we're overdue for a giveaway, so sorry, folks. We were 5 minutes late, but we're still doing 4, and I think we'll make up for the little addition Gary had. First giveaway of the night is a PB1000 Pro subwoofer, and the winner is Matt Sable. Congratulations, Matt
Yay,
Sable.
Matt.
Awesome.
We'll get your
Congrats.
info and ship that out. All right. So the next term is sort of one of those audiophile sound quality terms that you use to describe a speaker, but I think it's worth documenting what it means as people sort of try to assess when they're picking speakers what are the most important qualities. And the term I'm going to throw out there is revealing. What does it mean when a speaker is revealing?
Oh man, that's when you know you're standing in front of the real deal or not, because if you sit there and you know what something sounds like and you listen to it and something's missing or something is there that you're not typically aware of, or maybe it's adding to it, it will reveal if it really stands up to what you're expecting from. There's way more to it than that, but you've all been in front of a speaker that's kind of let you down, and that's when it's revealed that it's not up to what you're after.
Well, a lot of the
sometimes
time,
I will say that our speakers are ruthlessly revealing in the sense that sometimes people like speakers that sort of gloss over the detail and don't necessarily deliver all the detail and the description of the speakers to make them seem. And by the way, there's no right answer to this. They're warm sounding, and that sort of a thing. And we at SVS attempt with our speakers to reveal as much detail as possible and do it as accurately as possible. And that can sometimes mean that we're going to reveal the deficiencies in the content that you're listening to. But that is really what our goal is. I wouldn't call our speakers warm. I would call them transparent and revealing.
And I think another aspect of that, the receivers can also reveal quite a bit too. I can tell if we're in a room and we've got our product set up on one brand of receiver versus another because they have a sound too that comes through. So that's something else you kind of got to keep in mind as well.
I think it's a lot of it, as Gary said, the source content. If you can tell the difference between, say like compressed Bluetooth or CD bit rate or high resolution easily, the system is revealing. It allows you to easily hear the differences between the quality of the source content. Nothing worse than putting on a crappy recording on a really revealing system and you're like, ugh, that was just recorded badly. There's just a bunch of artifacts or whatever in there that makes it unenjoyable. But you put in an awesome recording that is high resolution and you're like, wow, this system really shows it off. So that's how I sort of define revealing.
Yeah, and I think live performances are especially exciting because, Gary taught me this one. It's like you'll hear the creak of a chair from like the violinist as they're getting ready for a performance and things like that. You may not hear from a lesser speaker system. So it can really mean a lot of different things, I think, is where we're getting at. But ultimately, it's about truth and what the speaker's capable of rendering.
And Nick, to your point, I mean, the creak of a chair, somebody might go, well, who cares about that? But the reality is it makes you start to feel like you're actually right there with this performer.
Suspension of disbelief. That's the magic of a great system. Another thing I learned from you. All right, next one. This is sort of a technical term, but I think it's very pertinent, us being a major subwoofer manufacturer. Ed, what is the roll-off frequency?
On the low end? We're talking
that's actually something, Nick, not for subwoofers. It's for any speaker, actually.
Yeah, if we're talking about the low end, it's the lower bass limit of the loudspeaker or the subwoofer, at which point it starts to roll off the frequency response, meaning it becomes less and less loud. And you can see this on our frequency response charts on our website for our subwoofers. So we typically will rate a roll-off frequency at -3 dB or -6 dB relative to the average output over the rest of the frequency response.
So this is a great point, and we've talked about this before. By the way, somebody said, what's the difference between revealing and harsh? And I thought to myself, we probably should make a distinction right now before we move off of revealing to say harsh is basically making the content sound worse and more sort of strident than it is or needs to be. That's not revealing. That's just harsh. Revealing is basically showing you the content in its truest form. So great question, but the person who asked about that, sorry, I missed your name. And then as far as
roll off,
question of roll off, it gets used by subwoofer companies and speaker companies. It gets abused because of what Ed said. Whenever you quote a roll off, meaning this is how low the subwoofer goes. I could tell you this such and such subwoofer goes to 12 hertz, which would be way below what's audible. But if I don't tell you the dB roll off, whether the 3 dB roll off point, you're never going to hear that 12 hertz. If all I'm saying is it goes to 12 hertz without telling you what the 3 dB roll off point is, it's a license to lie. And so always remember when you're looking at whether it's a speaker spec, where they're saying, oh, it goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, 20 to 20. But are they claiming a 3 dB roll off point, or are they just saying it goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz? And the same thing with subwoofers. I'm not going to name names, but there's a subwoofer that came out in the past year where they claimed a frequency response down to 12 hertz, which was totally amazing for that product. But they never claimed the 3 dB roll off. So the fact that you'll never hear that 12 hertz kind of gets lost when you claim it.
Ed, can we explain about what that roll off, what the plus or minus 3 dB means? Can you?
Yeah, there was a couple questions about what that plus minus 3 dB. Thanks, Larry. Ed, maybe you can dive
imagine
a little bit more.
Graph, a line that goes from the base to the highest frequencies. If the line is flat or within a certain tolerance, which is 3 dB, what we're saying, 3 dB is, by the way, experientially, 3 dB is the first change delta that the average person can notice. Meaning, when they lower the volume, they go 1 dB, you don't notice it went down. 2 dB, you don't notice. 3 dB, you raise your hand. Oh, I heard it. It got less. So the 3 dB roll off is kind of the industry standard for measuring. If you have a graph that is flat from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz within those 3 dB tolerances, then the product is delivering those frequencies as advertised or as claimed by the manufacturer or the brand. If all they're saying is it goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, then imagine the graph could be like a Mount Everest. The 20 hertz could be down all the way down here, and the 20,000 hertz could be all the way down here. And what you're really hearing is up here, the mid-range, the lower mid-range, and the higher mid-range, and the high frequencies and the low frequencies would be inaudible.
We've seen a lot of those,
and we've seen that before with other
egg-shaped frequency response. So,
and at the risk of being super obvious, dB is decibels. That means decibels, so it's actually referring to the volume.
I'm so sorry to throw out techno babble without defining it. My bad.
No, it's all good. I feel like
even after I gave you a hard time for giving me techno babble marketing terms, now I did it myself.
That's all right. We all have our comeuppance at some point. All right, final glossary term of the evening, and then we'll get another giveaway going. Subwoofer motor. We talk about the amp, we talk about the driver, we talk about the cabinet. What is the subwoofer motor?
Well, I'll field that one. The subwoofer motor is the magnetic structure sandwiched between steel and with the north and south poles, and the voice coil sits in the motor. And the motor
is a massive magnet, right?
Yep. It moves the voice coil back and forth within the poles, and it can basically controls the voice coil is attached to the cone, so the motor controls the subwoofer cone. It controls how it moves back and forth, how it starts, how it stops. And the stronger the motor, the more articulate and accurate the subwoofer driver will be. If you have a weak motor that's unable to control the cone, then it sounds loose and sloppy, and the transient response is poor. It doesn't stop and start when it's supposed to with the signal.
Is there a better way to control organically the motion of the driver and track it exactly to the content than a massive capable motor, Ed?
No, a strong linear motor is the best way to control the subwoofer driver.
So to continue to lead the witness here, why would anyone not have a massive motor on their subwoofer driver, for example?
Because they're cutting costs and being cheap.
I'm so glad. I was like, I wonder what he's going to say, because that is the answer. It's like there are other ways to control a driver, but if you don't use a massive motor, then the driver will not be able to track itself organically and exactly to the content.
Correct.
And that's really, I mean, and then you have this sort of boomy sound that, to your point, Nick, about suspension of disbelief, it stops being convincing. It stops feeling like the real deal.
So there were a couple of follow-ups about the voice coil, and I'm going to attempt to, give my layman's, and you guys can correct me, but it's essentially copper that's wound around a former, and electrical impulses are sent through that, which creates electromagnetic energy, which moves the driver. So it's essentially what's storing the energy in various amounts to either move the driver a lot or move it a little, depending on the content that's demanding of it. Is that somewhat accurate?
Yep, the voice coil is attached to the cone and the spider, and that creates the suspension for the cone to sit in, and the voice coil moves back and forth, basically in relation to the strength of the motor and the strength of the signal. So the motor.
And it's worth mentioning, there's a lot you can do with the voice coil with subwoofers, and we do. We have a 8-inch voice coil.
Cutting edge voice coils.
Yeah.
That, because a voice coil is really it's the connection between the motor and the driver. Yep. And the motor is only as good as the voice coil's ability to deliver what the motor is doing. And when you have a massive motor like ours, you can imagine that the voice coil would be prone to generate heat, or might be prone to not be able to keep up with it. And so we have some very, very sophisticated voice coil designs to deliver on the promise of that expensive motor that Ed was talking about.
Well, that's great. And I think we could go on and on probably defining the different elements of a motor, but we'll have future glossary explanations down the line here. But we do owe a giveaway, and our next giveaway is a Prime Wireless powered speaker system. And the winner of that is Jason Woodward. Congratulations, Jason. You got a sweet coming your way. All right. So before we get to our lightning round, I did want to dive a little bit into, because I feel like we're on this, we're riffing well on the subwoofers right now. I wanted to talk a little bit about subwoofer DSP, because I think there's a lot that goes into this that maybe people don't know about. But I'm going to just start at a very high level, and I'll throw it to you first, Ed. Basically, what is subwoofer DSP, and how does it benefit the playback?
And Ed, what does DSP stand for?
Digital signal processing.
Digital signal processing.
We have a very powerful DSP chipset in our subwoofer amplifiers, and it allows us to essentially program exactly what we want the amplifier to do from a frequency response and output and compression and limiting standpoint. There's all sorts of filters and settings that are there to tailor the performance of the subwoofer, the frequency response, the way it behaves at its limits, in order to make it sound fantastic. So it's we were talking about the motor before. It's really what makes our sub special. It's a marriage between the amazing driver and the super powerful and sophisticated DSP that controls the amplifier and tells the woofer to do exactly what we want it to.
It's amazing to me when any high performance subwoofer that doesn't use DSP. I'm totally amazed to lay claim to be high performance and you're not taking the benefits of digital processing to that product. It's not right.
I remember
every subwoofer in every price range of our every one that we offer uses exclusively DSP processing, digital signal processing, super sophisticated 50 megahertz analog devices DSP that's actually gets used in full range audio processors, and we're just using it only for bass in a subwoofer.
And it also allows the end user to have all of those amazing menu options. That in and of itself requires a lot of DSP horsepower. So there's the behind the scenes magic that we infuse into the amplifier to make the subwoofer behave and sound the way it does. And then the end user, the customer, has all of those menu options at their disposal to tailor the subwoofer to their particular room and application.
And somebody asked, what about servo? Isn't that, I mean, I get it that servo sounds more sophisticated than using a massive motor. I get that. And this is, and I'm not one of these, I don't look at what other people do very much. We try to just be the best we can be at SVS. But what I will say to you is, when you have a massive motor that can organically track the subwoofer to the content without any form of mechanical correction, it's always going to be quicker and more true to the content, to the experience, than a servo. A servo basically watches the motion of the driver and compares it with the content going into the driver. And if it sees the driver making a mistake, it attempts to correct it. But because it's a mechanical, and Ed, correct me if I'm saying anything that you disagree with, because it's a mechanical process, it's very hard for a servo to keep up with the content. So it's not as organic as just spending the money the way we do to put a massive motor into our subwoofers to control it, the motion of the driver organically and true to the content. Ed, would you change anything I just said there?
No, not a thing.
Well, there's your primer on DSP, and again, there's a lot more depth we could get into as far as how to utilize it. And we talked about parametric EQ, but it's an important factor of why our subwoofers sound the way they do. So I thought it was a good explanation that you guys offered, and I think we can move on from there. And I wanted to
someone's asking, what is the meaning of organic? It's a good. That's fair to say. I mean, I'm trying to create an understanding that the product is connected to the content in a way that is almost transparent to the listener. You don't feel like you're listening to a subwoofer and speakers. You feel like you're experiencing that movie, or you feel like you're experiencing that music. And it makes, so when I say organic, I'm kind of saying that the speaker and the subwoofers and really the whole audio system or the whole home theater disappears and the experience just goes front and center. I hope that defines that word organic for you.
I think that was a good explanation. All right, well, let's start some user Q&A. And I don't know if you had a chance to write any down, Gary, but I got a lot of questions here that I think are really phenomenal. And
I wrote a couple down.
We're geeks here, so we don't just talk about audio. So I thought I'd throw this one to Larry first, since he sort of is an expert on all things TVs and the various content streaming solutions. But Team 5 Johnson asks, his theater is going live in 2 weeks, and he's curious if he should go with an Apple TV 4K or just use what's on the smart TV. What's really the benefit of one versus the other?
Well, whether it's an Apple TV or a Roku stick or something that's external, I do tend to recommend a separate device as opposed to what's built into the TV, because typically they offer more audio solutions. There's more services available to you as well. So that's normally where I go. It could be an Xbox or a PS5 or an Apple TV or an NVIDIA Shield. There's so many solutions, but you'll typically get better audio too from an external.
That's a huge statement. That's really important, actually. The TV, a smart TV has all these apps. They don't have all the apps, but what they can't do is, for example, the full-on Dolby Atmos. That could change with time. But if you have an Apple TV Plus or Fire Stick, and I should know this, but the other one that's pretty inexpensive that I believe it does it too. They'll all pass Hulu. They'll all pass. Yeah. They'll all pass Dolby Atmos. Yes, when you step up and get an Apple TV 4K, you're spending so much more money than a Fire Stick or what comes on the TV. I get it why you would have some hesitation, but if you can fit it into your budget, it's well worth it.
Yeah, and I tend to recommend the newer Xbox, the Series X or S, whichever one it is that has the disk drive, because we have them all in the house. But it's also a 4K player and a phenomenal streamer too.
A little more price there, but you get the you get the obviously the hardware solution there for Blu-rays. So that's a good little, I guess you could call it a hack, an expensive hack, but one nonetheless if you want to not have to invest in a separate streamer.
I mean, Larry won't like this because Larry loves physical media, but the benefit is you step up and you spend the money for something like that, and it doesn't remove the benefits of physical media, but it definitely reduces the benefits. Like, I can watch any movie I want to with an Apple TV 4K in Dolby Atmos by streaming it. Now, there's a lot of debate. Okay, streaming doesn't sound as good as the disc, but a lot of times the disc, you got to wait 3 months for it to come out, and then you got to, if you want the 4K one, it costs what, $30, Larry, or even more sometimes.
Yeah.
So there are benefits to just being able to rent it for $5 and get it in its full glory.
Yeah, that tends to be why I go and I buy the physical disc. Like this one, just because I have it sitting here, Alita, you bought it in 4K, you got the Blu-ray disc, and you get the streaming version of it too. So I think that's why I tend to go there, because if you buy a lot of movies, which I know a lot of you in the group do, you know, it's $20-25 to buy it digitally. So I tend to go with the disc route. But that's because we're also
doing I understand why people prefer physical media. I really do. But I think physical media is going away, and this at least lets you have the full Dolby Atmos 4K experience without having the physical disc.
Yeah, and somebody's asking if
the gap
Dolby
is
Atmos
closing.
streaming is the same as disc, and it's not.
The gap is closing over time. I agree with Gary. It's kind of sad to say, but I think physical media is going to go away. But I mean, just fast forward the last 5 years, how far we've come in streaming quality in terms of sound quality and video
Very
quality. True. And I think what Larry's saying is the external streaming devices are more state of the art typically than what's in your television, and will give you the best possible picture and sound quality, and are often, you know, firmware updatable in a manner that's more relevant to audio and video quality than your television is.
Great points by all. Next question. Don is asking, is there ever a time where you would plug the ports of your SVS speakers? Why or why not? Like we do with the subwoofers. I should say plugging the ports in a subwoofer changes the frequency response, and the app actually allows it to adapt and make it sound different based on what your desires are. But he's asking about speakers.
I would say in most cases, why we have a ported speaker is not so much to increase the bass, but just to give the driver the ability to, it's not the same reason why you have a ported subwoofer. It just creates a resonant frequency that allows the driver motion to be more true to the content. It's not a way of increasing bass. But there is a little bit of an exception. I have found that our ultra towers in certain smaller rooms benefit from using the port plugs, because they're just so dominant in the room that this reduces a little bit that sense of almost being ganged up on by the speaker. I don't know. I don't know. I know that's a terrible way to put it.
No, I was going to use the ultra tower as a use case too. Ultra tower, from a bass standpoint, sounds best in a larger room away from the walls. But if you're in a smaller room, it can sound a little bit strong in the bass regions, and plugging the ports will tame that down and make it a good match to the acoustics of a smaller room. So that's a great example of when we would plug the ports on one of our loudspeakers.
Are there any other scenarios where you would do that with other? I don't think any of our other speakers that would be a good idea.
No, I mean, could you do it? Yes, but our only use case that we officially recognize is the ultra tower for that reason.
Someone's asking how far apart should the stereo front speakers be? And the answer is, first of all, we know you have lives, and so there are other voting partners. And so part of it is what works for everyone in the house, because what you want is for everyone to be your conspirator in enjoying this hobby. That said, the ideal would be between 4 and 10 feet apart, and your best listening position forms sort of an equilateral triangle between you and the two front speakers.
Yep.
Good explanation.
And that brings me, can I?
Yeah, I was going to say, before we do our next giveaway, why don't you hit one of your questions there?
I got two good ones, both to do with speakers. Do you want to do the giveaway first? It's 6:44. Up to you.
No, we've been late on all our giveaways. Let's do the two questions, and then we'll be a little late if that's
All
okay
right.
with you.
So one person said, I have up-firing Dolby Atmos speakers, but I don't always hear the effects. What do you recommend? And I mean, I was like, this is such a softball. That was early in the show, but I'm like, this is such a softball. I had to write that one down because I agree with you, the person who asked that question. I'm sorry I didn't keep up with it enough to write the name down. We agree. Smith and I were sitting late at night in a design session, very tired. We'd been traveling, and we were like talking about this. And of course, the ideal is to have the Dolby Atmos creates sound coming down at you from the ceiling to create a 360-degree effect, right? Or excuse me, a three-dimensional effect. That's one of the really cool benefits of Dolby Atmos. Object-based surround sound, we create a three-dimensional effect, but you need to have sound coming down at you from the ceiling. But it's hard to install a speaker in your ceiling that sounds good. And in-ceiling speakers don't sound very good. So, and a home theater is only as good as its weakest link. And you don't want the weakest link to be the thing that's supposed to make the home theater amazing, which is having height effect speakers. So Smith, and this is Smith's idea, I'm taking zero credit for it. Smith's like, what if we could create a speaker that was super high up on the side wall, all the way up to the ceiling, aiming down at the listener? It would be much easier to install because it's on a wall and not hanging from your ceiling. And it would create the true height effect sound instead of a faked one. And in case you don't know what I mean by up firing, that's the speakers that sit on your front speakers and aim upward at the ceiling, and you're supposed to hear the reflection back down at your ear. That doesn't work very well. First of all, speakers are not flashlights. They don't beam sound that way. There's a little bit of beaming effect with those speakers, but it's not enough to really have a convincing effect. It's much better if you can do it to have a direct radiating height effect speaker right down to your ear. And that's what the SVS Prime Elevation does. And it's relatively easy to install. It has a really cool template-based plate that you, there's Larry's got his installed perfectly. You can see them up there, up on the sidewall, right up against the ceiling. And so relatively easy to install, aims down at you and creates a convincing height effect speaker.
All right, before you get to your next one, let me do a quick giveaway here. And as a reminder, we'll be doing a pair of our Prime bookshelf speakers with the premium SoundPath Ultra speaker cables. And the winner of that speaker is Robert Reese. Congratulations, Robert Reese.
Yay, Robert.
Prime bookshelves and some sweet cables coming your way. Gary, was there a follow-up question you had too about speakers? Or
I just thought this was a really good question that this person asked. And I'm sorry I didn't keep up with the name. This person said, I don't have space constraints. Is there any reason why I would want a bookshelf speaker over a tower speaker other than the space constraints? And I thought, what a good question to ask. You know, I guess the general wisdom would be you only buy bookshelves because you don't have room for a tower speaker. And that's not 100% true, though. Bookshelf speakers have a certain elegance to the way they deliver sound because they're completely decoupled from the room they're sitting on. Now, by the way, bookshelf speakers, it's a bit of a misnomer. Almost no one ever puts bookshelf speakers actually on a bookshelf.
Yeah.
They're usually mounted on a stand, and therefore they're fully decoupled from the room. So a bookshelf speaker can create some magic because of that. And a sleeper speaker that we offer at SVS, and there are other good bookshelf speakers of other brands, but our Ultra bookshelf speakers, which I added to the giveaway that's coming up, that's a speaker that's really capable of creating magic. It's a big bookshelf speaker, so it's not one. It's not cheap. It's they're I don't remember how much they are right now. What are they? $1,200 a pair?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. But they are capable of creating magic because they're fully decoupled from the room, and therefore they can have a kind of a rock solid image. But we work really hard on our tower speakers to make them do the same thing from a tower configuration. And if you're not space constrained, and especially if you're doing it in a home theater, you're probably going to lean towards a tower speaker, like our Prime Towers or our Prime Pinnacle Towers or our Ultra Towers.
Yeah, and the one thing you do have to take into account is those stands, and if you've got kids or pets,
that's right.
That's another perk of the
tower. Plus, they're an
towers.
additional expense. You want to have a stand that's solid, and you got to pay for that.
All right. I always like to say if a bookshelf on a stand takes up essentially the same room as a tower does. So I'm a tower guy myself, and for that reason.
Yeah, but you got a really wide piece of AV furniture. Makes a natural stand for the SVS bookshelf speakers or any bookshelf speakers. You can eliminate the need for a stand as well. So,
well, sure, that would be what Gary said. If you're truly putting them in an entertainment center because you don't have the room on the floor, then by all means, bookshelf comes into its own at that point.
And then it's a whole separate debate whether you want to go 2.1 bookshelves in a sub versus towers if the cost is roughly the same. That's a whole separate conversation.
Yeah, you're right. That is a separate topic.
No, but it's a great question. I mean, that's actually really good for the lightning round at some, maybe not today, but I would have, before I really started immersing myself in the different possibilities, I would have said, get the towers. Don't do the 2.1, but I have changed my mind. I actually think a great pair of bookshelf speakers with a subwoofer that keeps up with them, that is, I'm sorry, here's the O word again, that's organic to the speed of the speakers, and our subwoofers are really quick. That can often be a better choice in the same budget than a more expensive pair of tower speakers and no subwoofer. What do you think?
All right, we got about 10 minutes left. I think we got to step up the lightning part of this lightning round.
It's not lightning enough for you?
Nah, I think this is great knowledge, but I want to get to a bunch of questions. We have so many good ones.
Light here.
All right, Ed, this one's going to be for you, and it might be an it depends type question, but I think it's a good one.
We're not supposed to say that word anymore.
Ed didn't like it. Ed got roasted when he said it depends.
It depends.
You say everything but that. But Joe is asking, should the phase of dual subwoofers set up on the front stage be identical?
Yes, unless they are really far apart. If they're, say 6-7 feet apart, I would tend to set the phase the same if they're both on the front wall. If they're 10, 12, 15 feet apart on a really wide, then you might be able to experiment with the phase control because they're actually far enough apart to set up some standing waves between each other and the side walls. So there's an opportunity to use the phase control to get them a little bit better integrated. So at the risk of saying it depends, it does depend on how far apart the two subwoofers are.
That's okay.
Yes and no.
That's okay. All right. Julia asks, what is the difference between the Ultra Center and the Prime Center speaker? She's considering both, but doesn't know how to choose which one.
Well, they're both phenomenal. They're both three-way speaker design, so there's a lot of similarities between them. But when you go from the Prime to the Ultra, you're going to gain significant size in regards to the physical space, larger drivers, different mid-range. The way the actual speaker is made, it's a little bit different component inside there too, and it can handle more power, a little bit different sensitivity. I don't want to get geeky, but you're going to get more range.
Handle a bigger room.
Yeah, so it's
a little bit more effortless,
the
larger room, Ultra Tower or Ultra Center.
And you can totally mix and match. We have a lot of people, like down in my living room, I have Prime Pinnacle Towers and the Ultra Center channel. This room is all Prime, so you can mix and match. But if you do have a larger room or a wider sitting area, you'll benefit from the additional size and capability of the Ultra Center channel. And it's got dual binding posts too, so if you need to feed a little bit more energy, you can do that too with the bi-amp bi-wire.
I think it's important to say, though, that both of those center channels are voiced very similarly. They both sound amazing. The Ultra Center obviously has the edge because it is bigger and it has a little bit higher dynamic range and better power handling. It's just a better choice for a bigger room. But I have both in my system, and I continue to marvel at how natural the Prime Center sounds in my upstairs living room system.
Yeah,
it's a great center channel.
And I will say, because I've got extensive experience with both of them as well, that in a smaller room, The prime center is almost indistinguishable from the ultra center, but
Yep.
in a larger room, the ultra center really shines. It's really great if you have people in the room that are way off to the side. They're going to have a great experience with the ultra center, despite the fact that their listening position isn't perfect.
And all right, next question comes from Pete, and I'm going to rephrase it a bit, but Pete is asking, is there any difference in sound quality if you're using a Y splitter from a single output on an AV receiver to your two subwoofers, or if you're using both of the two subwoofer outputs on the AV receiver? So basically splitting it from one or using them both. Any difference in sound whatsoever?
I don't know why the person wouldn't run two cables one to each subwoofer, but I don't think in theory there would be much of a difference.
No, there's not, unless the receiver has the ability to handle the subwoofers discreetly, like for example, Odyssey XT32, where it does distance and level matching independently. The vast majority of receivers essentially have a Y splitter built inside of them. So it's the same exact signal at both subwoofer output jacks, which is really no different than using an external Y splitter. So in most cases, there's no difference in sound quality at all.
So very much in the same vein. This question, Ryan asks, he heard that using a Y adapter and running two cables from the Y adapter to a single subwoofer, so basically the dual
Using
lining
left and right
configuration. Yeah. Is there any benefit to doing that versus just a single cable? Do you get more power, more output?
Benefit to the person selling the cables, but other than that, no benefit.
It plays louder because you're sending twice you're doubling the voltage, and the subwoofer will play louder versus a single-ended input. But obviously, it doesn't magically increase the performance of the subwoofer. It's no different than turning up the sub channel level in the
you can just turn up the sound.
It's the same thing. But it does make it play louder when you connect to both inputs.
Yeah.
All right, next question. Eric asks, should all speakers in a surround sound system be evenly powered, or is there different voltages you should send to each to get the best performance possible?
It's kind of an interesting question. Most receivers will have similar power per channel, but if you're running smaller speakers for your rear surrounds and maybe your sides or height effects, and you have some larger towers up front, you can do extra amplification for those that can handle it, and you'll benefit from that. But if you're just using a conventional receiver, most of them are going to have equal power, and that's where getting in and adjusting the levels to each channel can benefit you. If you don't think you're getting enough out of the back channels, just bump them up a little bit. Or if you feel like your entire system could be a little underwhelming, that's where the upgrade path comes into play, whether it's adding on amplification or a beefier receiver.
Well, I think the question is there any benefit to what I do, which is I have a really high performance power amplifier running my fronts, and then the other amplifiers in the receiver running all my other surround and speakers and center channel. And that would have been a really tricky thing to do prior to Odyssey. I've told everybody I have the top of the line Denon receiver now in my theater. But with Odyssey setting the levels, you're fine. You can have a really good amplifier driving the front speakers, and you can mix and match, and you'll be fine. The benefit of having this really high performance amplifier on my front speakers is I can take the Denon receiver completely out if I want to listen to two channel music and have a pure path to my main speakers. And I like doing that when I'm listening only to two channel music. Whether it's
I'm the same way. I run a external 5-channel amp in my system. I'm running an 11-channel system in my reference theater. The front channels are the ones that are the most power hungry. They have the most signal content and the most power demand. So it makes sense if you're going to throw an external amplifier in the system to power, front, left, and right, or front, left, and right, and center, or in my case, front, left, right, center, and the surrounds. My receiver powers the back surrounds and the 4 overheads, those are low demand channels, so the receiver is not working very hard, and the external amps doing all of the heavy lifting.
Well, that brings us to just about 7 o'clock, and I feel like we have so many great questions.
This time flew by
here.
for me. I'd like to be, I know we're going to do this final giveaway. And Larry, you remember what we added to it, right?
Yes.
But I'd like feedback. Like this seemed to fly by to me, but maybe that's because we were under pressure to do all this talking. Was this a good use of everyone's time for the last hour? Looking at the comments,
I've seen a lot of really good comments about how informational this is and how much they're getting from it.
Careful, Gary. You might have to stick around for another hour. We got lots of questions here, but no, we're very punctual here.
Leave them wanting more, Nick. Leave them wanting more.
That's my line, but all good. Well, as we alluded to at the beginning, we are giving away for the final giveaway of the evening an SB2000 Pro with the SoundPath Wireless Audio Adapter. But that's not all. We've added on a pair of Ultra Bookshelf speakers, so you have a truly kick butt 2.1 system coming your way here. But before I announce the winner's name, next happy hour is scheduled for Thursday, March 31st, 6 p.m. Eastern time. As always, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel. You'll get alerts when that one is going to pop off, so you don't have to worry about reminders. So subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook. But winner of that 2.1 system is Chris Reed. Congratulations, Chris. You got an awesome
congratulations
coming your way.
Setup.
We wish our guest for tonight, Rob Burrell, good health. He's going to be back here in a couple of weeks, we hope, and super excited to get back here March 31st. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and happy listening as always.
Thanks, everybody. Lots of positive energy in the comments. This was really fun for us.